Welcome everybody back to the DomCast episode 17. I am here on a Sunday before the Lakers and Suns game, so everything will be accurate to that. And I am here with a guest. It's somebody that I have worked with before, someone I've played 2K with quite a bit. God damn, that was almost a year ago already. But either way, this is Ft.Alvini. Is your YouTube name actually Ft.Alvini Linguine, or is it just Ft.Alvini?
It is Ft.Alvini Linguine for the worst reasons possible.
I'm sure we'll get into that at a certain point, but you know, for people who don't know Ft.Alvini out there, it's another NBA YouTuber, definitely has some creative content, so we'll definitely shout out your socials. And before we get to any of that, again, thank you all for rating the show on Spotify, on Apple. It is very easy, especially on Spotify. There's a button right there, you can just press it, you can rate it. I actually learned that Spotify makes you listen to the show before you rate it. That is a genius idea. I tried to rate a show earlier and they were like, nah, click on it first, listen, so you can't troll. That's good. So that means y'all 5 stars in general are genuine. I'm reading the script right here because it says Clippers in general, and yeah, this is actually, you know, we haven't done a lot of Clippers talk on this podcast. I've mentioned them here and there because I'm still expecting it to be a first round out, but yes, Ft.Alvini is actually a real live Clippers fan. Like, we found a genuine one. It's crazy because like I just feel like even though they've been good and they've been owning the Lakers for a while and they've been contenders, you don't really find them out there. So before we get into some actual Clippers talk for this season, how did that actually happen? You do not live in LA. How did you choose that LAT?
Yeah, so for everybody that knows, I'm based in Alabama, and honestly, the only reason I really got into them is because when I was 13, that was when I was first able to start dunking, like literally. That was my first time I ever dunked, and I wasn't really into the NBA at that point. I wasn't watching a lot of basketball. But I remember my earliest memories of ever watching Clippers basketball was seeing Lob City on SportsCenter every morning before I went to school, and just being so infatuated with CP3 throwing lobs to Blake Griffin. I remember seeing the between the legs lob from Jamal Crawford to Blake Griffin, seeing all those highlights every morning. I was like, yo, that is my team. They are so cool. And of course, like I said, I never started watching them play the playoffs until like game 7 when they went against the Spurs and CP3 hit that game winner over Tim Duncan. And I was just like, yo, I love this team. I started keeping up with them all the time. But at the same time, though, we know how they are in current day and all the stuff that has happened throughout the 2010s with them. So I've been going through a lot of pain, but it's the first team I have ever claimed, even though, you know, a lot of people's like, well, aren't you a fan of the Grizzlies or the Hawks? The teams were never really all that good when I was growing up, so I never really cared. And plus, you know, I don't have to be geographically locked into my fandom, so I kind of just said, hey, it's the team that I fell in love with first, and I'm just going to keep it up.
Before I get into any more Clippers or the Clippers fandom, is Alabama as bad as the internet says?
No.
It's not.
No. All the stereotypes that we get belongs to other states. I swear to you, because everybody in Alabama always talks about it. We are not the incest state. We aren't the Ku Klux Klan state. I promise you. It is the only thing that we can ever get is us being sports fanatics and Saban worshipers. Or very country. I can imagine us being very country, but even then, there are worse states than us. We are a really happy neutral over here with all that type of stuff.
I just had to ask because I know the people that have been following me long enough, they weren't gonna let you say you were from Alabama without me bringing it up or asking that question.
Yeah, because even the people in my Discord, they always throw the Dom clips at me when you talk about Alabama, and I'm like, bro, we're not that bad.
No, you know what? I get it, because being from Florida, it's like, look, Central Florida is actually not the bad part. It's the stuff above us. That's where it gets kind of weird. But I'm like, all the Florida memes, I'm like, Central Florida is not really like that, but whatever. That's for a different podcast and a different day. For now, we can actually, you know, that's why I like bringing people on, because we get fans of teams that I might touch on, but I don't generally find interesting enough to do deep dives on or anything like that. However, the Clippers, just because I hadn't really, you know, been talking about an A-seeded team that I believe is more than likely going out in the first round if they're not healthy, doesn't mean I haven't found them interesting. They've found ways to survive. Tyronn Lue has earned his clout as a coach. I think specifically, especially in last year's playoffs. I mean, he was good before that, but I think it's where people really noticed. And this year, just once again, just dealt a shitty hand. Guys, Paul George disappeared one day, which I'm surprised nobody's brought up. You're familiar with the Dom Curse Twitter meme, obviously, by now. Yes. Surprised nobody brought that up, because I don't think he's played since the day we met, like when I talked to him in Los Angeles. I think that was it. I think like I went up there and talked to him. He hasn't played since then.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh, see, now you're gonna bring it up and people are gonna start digging for that tweet.
I'm like, nobody's ever said it, but I was like, okay, no, I'm cool with that, whatever. But yeah, Paul George just disappeared with that elbow injury. Kawhi Leonard obviously recovering from that partially torn ACL. If not for that injury last year, could have easily been in the NBA Finals, could have won the NBA Finals. But such is life as a Clippers fan. Y'all was surviving though. Over 500, 2 games over 500 right now. Most definitely a play-in team at this point. Probably not going to make up a 5-game difference the way things are. But, you know, you guys have been trying to incorporate Brandon Boston Jr., who I think has some potential. Doesn't play a whole lot, but he does get some minutes out there. Reggie Jackson, he's ever since last year's playoffs with the Clippers, I think he kind of not became a meme, but became the face with the glasses and the goggles and whatnot. That's the icon or whatever. Amir Coffey breakouts this year. Did get rid of Ibaka, so he's not there anymore. Terrence Mann's still there. What exactly have you seen and been interested in with the Clippers this year without PG and Kawhi, and kind of where do you see it going? Because at this point, I would assume if one does come back, it would be PG. It's hard for me to imagine Kawhi coming back this year and just going for it from the AC, but I also don't know. I also don't know where the mind is at.
Well, they are both actually doing game shoot-arounds and are practicing right now, which is not a lot of physical practices right now with the team. But I say the thing I am most impressive with, and the thing that I feel like has really been putting us back this last decade, is chemistry. Doc Rivers is not a chemistry coach. He is a business, let's get it done type of coach. But when you can create a culture with these teams, they play a lot better than what they're brought up to be. We've seen a lot of times, even what you want to talk about later with the Cavaliers, when you can bring a team together and make them all happy and really bring them to a point to where they can all play together and be happy to whatever position that they're in, then that's what creates these type of games. Because we've had, I think, like 5 multiple 20-point deficits that we've had to bring back and end up winning games in. I know we had that one 30-point one against the Wizards, I believe, that went from us being down 30 to Luke Kennard hitting a 4-point play to end the game, stuff like that. Because, like I said, I've always said throughout the 2010s, we've always had a very deep team when it came to bench depth and then star players, but we just never been able to bring it together. Because I thought our year was going to be when we had when we had Lou Will and Montrezl Harrell off the bench. But come playoff time, we've had a bunch of, either mental health stuff going on with Paul George, Montrezl Harrell's grandma dying and stuff like that. And Doc Rivers wasn't the type of guy to be to bring them together and make anything happen from it. And like I said, Tyronn Lue is a great X's and O's coach, even though he does make some questionable decisions sometimes. But you can definitely see it with how he's able to do more with less. He's able to bring guys up like Brandon Boston to have his occasional 20-point game. He's able to get Luke Kennard's confidence back up, which was my main problem with him. He has never really wanted to go out there and just shoot whatever he wants to, because he's one of the better shooters in the NBA. That's what we ended up giving him that $13 million a year contract for. And then, of course, Reggie Jackson now wants to be a Clippers for life just off of the opportunity that Lou Will gave him after being basically shunned from the NBA, because we picked him up off of a buyout deal, if I remember correctly, when he was with Doc Rivers. No, he was there in Ty Lue's first year. So he was able to bring him in and make him super confident in himself, and him being a third option, or I guess now a fourth option when Norman Powell comes back. So like I said, there's a lot of potential for this team. You just got to see it all come together with everybody coming back, because it was super unfortunate because Joe Ingles was the one that injured Kawhi Leonard super late in Game 7. And then, of course, Paul George can't do everything by himself, and he kind of turned off late in that Suns series too.
Yeah, no, for sure. And they got further than I and a lot of people expected them in that series. It's where that, as a group, I would say the Clippers really gained, and the Tyronn Lue specific Clippers gained my respect, because I remember last year's playoffs was a roller coaster ride, man. They went down, they lost both their home games to Luka Doncic, and I was like, okay, this is right after the meltdown last year, 3-1. Like, all right, you're gonna come and lose to Luka ball, which Luka generational talent, but gosh, this is a defensively perimeter centric team. I remember Zubac kept getting switched on to him, and I was like, bro, holy shit, there's no way.
I was saying that Clippers fans can never have a win without having their blood pressure going over the roof, because we just can't seem to win by normal means. It's always got to be something dramatic, whether it's a 20-point blowout or a 20-point comeback. Because those first 2 games, Ty Lue would not change up his defensive system at all. He was so adamant on making somebody else guard Luka and letting Kawhi rest. And then game 3 through 7, he was like, okay, Kawhi, go out there, try to lock him up. Of course, it still didn't work, but we ended up winning those games, probably because Kawhi was putting a lot more effort into those games. And then we go on into the Jazz series. Donovan Mitchell on a messed up leg is doing the same exact thing. Ty Lue is like, nope, you can't guard him. You can't guard him. Then the rest of the games, he's like, okay, fine. We're down 2-0. We have to do what we have to do. Guard him.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Kawhi still go out there and does what he does, putting up a 50, 40, 90 damn near on a night-to-night basis, despite having to play defense 24/7 on one of the better scorers in the NBA.
Yeah, absolutely. That watching him in Dallas game 6, I believe, that was a spiritual experience where you end up forcing the game 7. And so you go through that, you beat the Jazz and lose Kawhi, but then still duke it out with the Suns. And I was like, okay, this group now they're more than a meme to me. This is, I fully respect this squad because we're about to go out to Dallas thinking, man, this is just par for the course with the Clippers. And now it's just a curse. You know, they're always like right there and then there's something with it. But
I don't know if you ever seen the clip, but I got to send it to you later. I was doing a watch party. I think it was either game 1 or game 2, the Valley Oop. And I literally called that play happening.
Oh, yeah, I seen that.
Yeah, because I'm like, Jay Crowder was already throwing lobs to near Zubac the whole game. And I'm like, watch him just try to just throw it over Zubac again and they win it. And of course, unfortunately for me, that's exactly what he did. And I was like, you tell me Tyronn Lue couldn't see the exact same thing I've been seeing all game. And I was like, I don't get paid to do this. So I'm just over here just getting mad.
Yeah, and that was the day a lot of us learned that there actually is no basket interference or whatever it is over the goal. Because I know the ball went over the goal and that's when Aiden signed it down.
Yeah, you could technically tip it in as long as it didn't make contact. Right, or as long as it wasn't qualified to be a shot. Everybody could tell it was going to be a hoop.
Right. So that was interesting. Anyways, speeding up to this season where we are, there's other games that are important too, but specifically they haven't lost to the Lakers in a minute, and it's really fascinating this year because there's been games where the Lakers had everybody. Well, not everybody, but they had LeBron and Anthony Davis. That feels like it's good enough to beat a depleted Clippers squad. And the games that you've seen or reviewed or whatever with the Lakers and Clippers, what's worked so far in giving y'all an advantage? Because in the last game they played, I believe that was the one the Clippers won by like 30, right? Yeah, that was that one, and then the one before that where Reggie Jackson did the
game winner. Yeah, did that kick out to my Lou down the court.
Hey, he's been disrespectful in these Laker matchups. There was that one, and then last game he did something.
Yeah, but he has that rivalry with Russell Westbrook, so he's probably putting in a little extra effort just for that alone.
Yeah, right. But what's going on in those games where you're able to take a team that has LeBron and AD, meanwhile there is no PG or Kawhi? How exactly, from what you've seen in those, what goes down?
Really just better coaching and just better players. I mean, I was one of the many people, let me rephrase that was saying there was a super team, but it just seems like they just can't bring it all together. Even going back into a couple years ago, because I know this has been spanning out for like the last 3 or 4 years, if I remember correctly, we've had that grittiness to us, while the Lakers just seem to not have that same energy. Like we've always had this, battle of LA type of thing. But it seems like they don't really treat it that way. They just treat it like every other game. While the Clippers, who are treated as the little brother, you got people like Marcus Morris who don't mind roughing people up. You got Patrick Beverly, junkyard dog of LA. And then you have, all these other people who are just like, yeah, let's go on and prove ourselves. Because every single year, it's always like, Lakers are better than Clippers. Lakers are better than Clippers. And it's like, every single year after the 2010s, it's always been the same story. We beat them in the regular season, but the playoffs is where we can't get anything done because we never meet them there. I don't think, because every year we've been on the opposite side of the, playoffs. So we've never had a Clippers-Lakers playoff series yet. So I don't know when that's ever going to happen, but I feel like it's just the grittiness of the Clippers, whether it be the players' personnel or whether it be the coaches that we have now who wants to enforce that, to use as extra energy to beat them in the first place.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have been robbed of it, and it's looking like at this point next year might be our last chance to really get what we thought we were going to get 2 years ago, something, when Kawhi Leonard and PG joined forces there. We automatically in our minds were, LeBron, AD, Kawhi, PG, that's happening. That has to happen. It didn't happen first time, didn't happen last year because of injuries mostly. Not going to happen this year because of injuries, and then next year could very well be LeBron's last run with the Lakers. Who knows exactly where that's going.
Yeah, and then we're just going to be waiting for the next eventual superstar to sign with the Lakers as usual.
Exactly. Yeah, it's coming at this point. Sometimes when I see LeBron and AD in the purple and gold, and I just think, man, they literally get and have had everybody. It's fucking insane at one point or another because everybody wants to be a Laker. I get it. But so this year, and I was talking about this with my chat earlier with the Clippers and finishing this season. You say PG and Kawhi and shoot around. I actually saw a video involving that, so it's a little bit of optimism. And I was wondering which direction they go with it, and like what direction the fans want them to go with it. Because on one hand, you can look and say, well, guy coming back from PG, I think PG probably should come back, and maybe he will come back. If he's ready. Kawhi, on the other hand, has to go through the whole game recovery portion of a torn ACL, and he'd be doing that almost exclusively in the playoffs, which I think Tyronn Lue said he wouldn't bring back either of them if they didn't come back before the playoffs. So Kawhi would probably get a little bit of runtime before that. Do you think it's worth this season bringing one or both of them back and trying to make a run, just because you never know what the future holds? Like, they could easily get injured next year and you don't have a chance at it. Or do you think that would be realistic to get them now and maybe go on a run? Are you looking and going, you know what, regardless of what's happening here, we want to just let Kawhi fully recover, come back next year, and then run? Because you did also just have this trade a month ago. You acquired Robert Covington and Norman Powell. I don't know if Norman Powell's playing again this season. That one actually kind of
I think he fractured his foot. Now, he had an IG live, because I follow a bunch of fan pages. He had an IG live where he said that he could potentially come back this season, but he doesn't want to give the fans too much optimism, just because he's able to do the same thing with his trainers and do shoot-arounds himself. But being practice ready and being game day ready is two entirely different things.
Oh, of course. Yeah, and there you go. There's just more with the Clippers' luck. Norman Powell's a great piece for them, and immediately was making an impact.
3 games.
And he was good. He was good too, and boom, out just like that. Never seen him again. But next year, that's going to be a hell of a lineup when you get to run some of those PG and Kawhi lineups with one or both of them. That's going to be a hell of a thing. But are you looking at it and saying, you know what, time is money, basically, and we want to go for it if we have the chance to go for it and bring them back this year? Let's just look at what we can do. We played the Suns well without Kawhi last year. That would be the first round right now if everything held exactly the way it is. Let's go for it. Let's bring them back and let's see where it's at. Or do you just want to, build the grittiness of this team and the chemistry of this team that you have with the role players at the moment and start fresh next year? What do the fans actually want with the Clippers? Because that's a hell of a decision, really. It's like the one the Bulls had to make with D Rose way back when he was recovering and it was trying to get him back for the 2013 playoffs, I believe.
Yeah, what I've always been hearing is they'll take either or, but they prefer just waiting next year. Yeah. At the same time, though, anything bad could happen in an 82 game season, which makes sense, just our luck as fans of a franchise. But at the same time, though, I believe if PG doesn't come back, Kawhi doesn't come back. I do not see Kawhi coming back if PG doesn't come back. So that's first things first. But next year, when we can bring it all together and then the contract still staying together, I believe next year would be the year to try to go for it. We can just do what happened, I think 3-4 years ago, where Doc Rivers had like that 42-40 team that went against the Hampton Warriors and still was able to beat them for 2 games. We could potentially have that same exact thing happen again, but with the team that we have now, Reggie Jackson being our best player, and of course the Zubac versus DeAndre Ayton situation going to happen again most likely, I don't see them really competing. And then if you also bring in the fact that PG and Kawhi are going to have some reps coming into it, I don't think it's the best decision to let them go out there and do it, because you never know. They might start off real slow. We just lose anyway. I mean, it'll be good for like chemistry reasons and getting them back out there, but I believe it's just best just to wait next year, because that's all what I've been saying this whole time. I'm just like, let's just wait till next year. Everybody's going to come back. There's no one that we have to re-sign. All the rookies are going to be coming back too. I think the only person we would have to sign back is Hartenstein, because I believe he was just signed to a rest of the year contract, and I don't see him leaving. So, because this is his first real opportunity in the NBA, so I hope he has that tad bit of loyalty. I don't know if anyone's really going to want him like that. No offense to him, but I feel like it'll be next year is the good time to go for it, just for the sake of bringing everything together, letting everybody get healthy, letting those other guys off the bench get a lot more reps, because that's been a really important factor. Because due to PG and Kawhi being out, you got Terrence Mann getting more minutes and more responsibilities. You got Luke Kennard having more ball handling responsibilities and things like that.
And the name there, Terrence Mann. I'm curious where you've been with him this season, because that was all the rage. Him and Reggie Jackson, really, at the end of that run, was like, well, Reggie we've known, but Terrence Mann, it's like, damn, this guy just came out of nowhere, basically. He's killing. This year, I feel as if, we, as fans of other teams, you don't really hear about him as much. You really have to kind of go in and dig in to see what he's doing. Are you pleased with the season he's having, though, or were you expecting some breakout? Or are you like, okay, that was the breakout, and now he's just a solid rotation piece, basically?
I feel like, because this was a bit optimistic from my end, but I feel like he could have been doing this year what Miles Bridges could have been doing this year. Because he has the ball handling ability and the scoring ability to go out there and get a bucket. It's just the fact that Tyronn Lue probably discourages it. Because you have people like Reggie Jackson, who's I think he's the leading scorer out of everybody right now. Yes. And Marcus Morris. Because I've seen a couple of games where he went out there and got 20 or 30, and I'm just like, you can do that all the time. Because after what he did in game 7 against the Jazz, I'm like, he has the potential to do this. We see a lot with those type of Florida State guys, long, lanky, and with a lot of potential. But it comes down to what the coach wants to see from him. Because he started off, when Kawhi was out, I wanted to see him and Paul George be the 2 and the 3. But that's when we had the Eric Bledsoe thing, and I'm like, see, that's just not going to work, and it didn't work. That's why we ended up trading him in the first place. And then we had him off the bench, and he still didn't really have much of a role. He was just kind of being a jack of all trades. Sometimes he'd be guarding a 7-footer in the post. Sometimes he'll get an open 3. Sometimes he'll be a cutter. I don't think he really has a well-defined role on the team, even though I'd want him to have more of a scoring role on the team, despite there being other scorers. At the same time, though, like I said, I wanted him to be more of an MIP candidate, him getting more extra minutes, because I feel like he deserved it. After Kawhi went out, he was out there doing his thing. But I guess Tyronn Lue was just prioritizing veterans out there for the sake of getting some playoff push, because I believe we was like top 4 for like the first month and a half. And then we started to fall back a little bit, because I know we had like multiple 5+ game winning streaks in the beginning of the season.
Yeah, and to your point, it pretty much is by committee on the Clippers. The scoring is a bit evenly distributed. You got guys averaging double digits all over. So, and the season wasn't lost even after losing your star players. It's still making a playoff push, as you said. So it wasn't really a situation of, okay, just go get yours now. It's a team that's still competitive.
There's always people who can come in and just replace the primary scorer. Marcus Morris, even as much as I don't like him sometimes, he comes in, gets us 20, 25. Reggie Jackson has his 30 pieces at times. Luke Kennard comes off the bench, he gets 20. It's a real team-oriented team compared to when Doc Rivers was here. Even when Kawhi and PG were taking the reins, they both were getting better at their playmaking skills. I mean, of course, in the playoffs, they're going to go out there and get 30 for the sake of being the star players, but they still both are averaging like 5 and 6 assists respectfully, just off of Tyronn Lue wanting more of a team-oriented thing. Because, everybody was, let me not say shitting on him, but everybody was getting on him for being kind of a puppet to LeBron, but we got to give him a little bit of credit for what he was able to do with LeBron in his first season over there, for them being down 3-1 and everything.
Oh, yeah.
And then he brought that same culture over here, just with people who are probably a little bit more open to listening, I guess, because, when you're dealing with LeBron, you'll know what you're going to get. And he was able to turn this into a well-oiled machine that's just like, hey, we can do this together as long as y'all are willing to do it together.
Yeah, and that's why I did, just on the topic of coaches, that's why I take my time and trying to evaluate these guys. Or when people ask me about a certain coach, I don't really, 'cause a question I always used to have is, how do y'all evaluate coaches anyways? When whatever coach LeBron had, they go, oh, this is his puppet. And it was like that for Tyronn Lue, as you said. I feel like it's been that way everywhere except Miami, because they knew Miami was a bit different, and they showed it, so he couldn't really get his way with certain things there. Right. But with coaches, I've always felt like, okay, either this team is winning and they've reached their potential, or they didn't, and that's how the coach is judged. I feel like there's not really a hard look at the X's and O's or what they've actually done with the culture. Maybe it's gotten better over the years.
I feel like it's more of an X's and O's and what they do with the team, because a strong opinion I've had this whole season is that Steve Nash is just basically a placeholder coach, because he doesn't really do anything with the team all that much. He has his assistants that helps out with the players, like Kyle Korver helping everybody out with their jump shot and things like that. But I feel like he's just kind of like a just go out there and do it type of coach. Y'all figure it out. Because if there's one thing I loved about the Nets when was it David Yeager that was over there? No, it was Atkinson, whatever his name is, Kenny Atkinson. Yeah. He brought in a culture, and we had the bench meme with that one with that one Cardi song. And he was able to bring it up with D'Angelo Russell being the star player and them making like a 7th seed that year or whatever. And their team wasn't even all that good. You had a young Jarrett Allen, a younger Karis LeVert, and others able to bring it together and do decently in the East. And that was D'Angelo Russell's breakout season. But like I said, you can see stuff like that when it comes to either X's and O's, being able to bring a bunch of grown men together and have them have the chemistry, which just makes them play better. When it's not all about business, people can actually enjoy the game of basketball rather than to have like a Doc Rivers, and it's like, okay, this is what we're going to do. You go out there, produce it, we win games. Because, we've had that one situation like with Big Baby Davis, I believe, that was talking about when he had like one good game, and all Doc Rivers said was just go do it again. No love, no support, no encouragement, just go do it again.
Oh man, Doc Rivers' name has been invoked a couple of times on this podcast, and I am just I don't wish anything bad for the Sixers, even though they are the op. But man, the shitstorm that would be if they go out this year prematurely and it involves Doc Rivers and James Harden on the same team, and James Harden
a little lucky 3-1 lead blowage.
Oh goodness gracious, bro. That man. Anyways, that's narrative side talk aside. The last person I kind of wanted to ask about on the Clippers is Brandon Boston Jr., because we're talking about integrating young guys, and he's somebody I paid attention to. I know he was in the G League for a little bit, so I was paying attention to him. He had a 40 ball down there. I saw a bit of the offensive bag. Do you see a place for not necessarily a place for him, but are you hopeful for him going into this next season? Because the rotation is definitely going to shift down a little bit. You're going to be adding 2 perimeter guys back. You just traded for 1, or even depending on how you use Rocco, you might have him on the wing as well. Is Brandon Boston going to get a chance to blossom on this Clipper squad? Because this is a young guy that's coming behind other young guys too now, and I see potential there with him in his game, and he's even gotten some burn with y'all. I see he plays around 15 minutes a game for the Clippers this year. But is that somebody that you're hopeful for, that you see potential in, or is it just kind of like he's here now and he might end up finding a better opportunity somewhere else?
I feel like we drafted/signed all those young guys, because I believe we signed like 3 of them, being Jason Preston, Brandon Boston, Keon Johnson, for the future rather than the now, because we didn't have any draft picks. All those picks that we got -1 was based off of us trading for them. And I feel like Brandon Boston is going to be either part of the future when Kawhi or PG eventually do leave or sign to other teams, because I believe PG's his contract year is next year, and then Kawhi's is the year after. I feel like they're supposed to come in and be the next pieces, because all the jokes I've been hearing is, oh, it doesn't matter what happens now, y'all better win now because y'all don't have any draft picks. And I'm like, that may be true, but we do have, we had 3 guys, now 2 that we drafted in last year's draft that could potentially come in and at least try to do something, being Brandon Boston and Jason Preston. I just feel like he is going to need his time. I feel like he should just stay in the G League. He was forced to come up due to all the injuries that we were having at one point. And I do love him because, I live in Alabama, so I watch a lot of SEC basketball. I knew about him ever since he was at Kentucky, but, Kentucky's kind of on the downfall right now. And, he wasn't able to get all the looks he's getting right now in college because it's a lot more traditional. It's not very open. So, some guys are able to go out there and score in very tight spaces like that, while, some people can take more advantage in an open court like the NBA, where people 5 out and you don't have a 2 big man traditional style down there where the paint is clogged up and everything like that.
Yeah, that is funny. These points you're making about his college play or his college opportunity, I guess, versus something in the NBA. That's exactly, I can't remember who I heard it from or who was saying it, but it's extremely similar to something I had heard when I was talking about him back in December. But hopefully a bright future for the Clippers. We will see. I, at very least, am hoping to see Paul George back. I feel like that could be fun. A 1-8 series between the Suns and the Clippers, and PG is there. Not going to beat them.
It's very beatable if we just get everybody back, because again, Norman Powell still has that foot issue.
Yeah.
If it's just Kawhi, PG, Reggie, Marcus Morris, and I guess Luke Kennard off the bench, you never know. We might get lucky if the defense plays right.
Yeah.
And if PG's feeling healthy, because we did get 2 games against them last year with basically the same exact team.
I will say, I get it, but I don't think last year's Suns are not this year's Suns. I don't think so.
Yeah, you're totally right. It's a whole different level.
But I think the Clippers would be competitive.
People.
Yeah, I think they'd be competitive with PG. If PG was there, I would see a competitive series. That I could see it then for sure. And that'll be interesting. We'll be talking about the standings a little bit more at the end anyways, because that's always fun to generally recap. For now, I should have segued straight into the Nets and Sixers once we were talking about Doc Rivers and James Harden, because boy, was that it wasn't a competitive game, but was it a game earlier this week. Ben Simmons returns, air quotes. Y'all can't see it. There's no video.
He gets a standing ovation once he does a dunk in the
and everyone was trying not to laugh. Even him, he was kind of smirking too. That shit was hilarious. But okay, just all that aside, because we'll probably have some Ben Simmons talk in a little bit. the actual game itself, Nets Sixers, well, the Nets came out and hopped on them hard. And it was funny because that's when I did a watch party for. I thought that the mismatches that would be created in that game, I thought it was going to favor the Sixers. I'm saying, okay, Kyrie on Harden, in which he actually did get some possessions on him. I was like, okay, Harden's going to be able to take that. They got nobody for Embiid down there. It's going to be great for the Sixers. What ends up happening instead is the Sixers offense is very slow and Harden is very not aggressive. So Embiid, it's nice for him to get all these free throws that he gets and all these fouls, but I feel like that was really slowing the offense down because it just became all right, let's throw Embiid down there with people that can't handle him, and it's going to be a foul. Because of that, though, I feel like nobody else is really getting a rhythm, including James Harden, which that has to do with an aggression thing. The matchup issue was, oh boy, Kevin Durant made life miserable for them, and he makes life miserable for anybody, but specifically the reason I'm looking at it so hard is because this could be a playoff matchup, and I'm looking and saying, okay, Kevin Durant calls for a ball screen from Nick Claxton that brings Joel Embiid up, and Embiid for a little while he was kind of in a drop, which was giving KD space, which is a no-no. Like, you can't come off of a screen and then have Kevin Durant an open jump shot. So like after 2 plays with that, they're like, okay, now we're gonna have Embiid step up. That just sends Claxton down the middle, and he's having the easiest finishes of his life on James Harden, who is playing just no defense at all on the, helping, which is weird because he's actually been straight defensively with the Sixers up to that point. But that was an interesting game. Like, I'm interested in your thoughts on that because they didn't have Ben Simmons on there. Seth Curry had a big night, which I think that's where it was almost like a glaring, not issue, but it highlighted the fact that, hey, the Sixers also gave up this guy too. Seth Curry was important. He was important to their space. He was important to their offense. They gave that up. That's a big thing for the Nets, and they hopped on them so hard. We'll get on James Harden's aggression. I'll get on that a little bit after, as you say whatever you have to say about it, because that one was eye-opening for me. This close to the playoffs, that one was like, wow.
Because even with me, I was saying, because a lot of people disagreed with me. I don't care. I'm willing to have debates about this type of stuff. But I was saying that Seth Curry being gone for that team was very vital. I wish they would have traded somebody else, but I know with Daryl Morey and whoever the GM over there with the Nets is, they probably was forced to give up Seth Curry if they wanted James Harden. Because on both sides, you had two separate problems that you had to get rid of and try to alleviate. And it works for both sides, but at the same time, the Nets aren't exactly a very good team, 3-point shooting team. Their best volume 3-point shooter on that team is Georges Niang, and he comes off the bench. And outside of that, you have James Harden doing ISOs, Joel Embiid doing whatever he does, Tyrese Maxey, who pulls up, but now he's kind of more of a play shooter with James Harden being the main ball handler. And Tobias Harris, someone that I thought was going to be a little bit better in this role, he isn't striving. Tyrese Maxey is getting a lot more looks than Tobias is, and honestly, he might be gone next season because just off of that, because he's not really playing well with them. But I feel like, again, just the fact that they gave up one of the best shooters in the league to a team who's just going to even be better with the shooting because of the gravity that Kyrie has, that Kevin Durant has. All they have to do is just throw it to the corner to Seth Curry, and we saw him get a 20-piece against his former team. And then now you also gave them a star quality defensive player in Ben Simmons if he comes back right mentally and all that stuff. Even with the Nets, though, they have the star power, but I feel like their team altogether isn't really good enough to compete because off the bench, one of their main problems also, you really don't have anyone off the bench doing anything for you. So it's really going to be oriented between what the top 4 guys can do and Tobias, who again is having a little bit of a drop-off since the trade, James Harden, Joel Embiid, and Tyrese Maxey. And it was funny, too, because there was an interview where Doc Rivers said, what are you going to do now with the lack of bench talent? He says, at all times, there'll be 2 people on the floor in a mix of James Harden, Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, and Tobias Harris. So there's always a scoring threat out there. But that also means that the minutes of all 4 of those guys is going to go up, and you just don't know what's going to happen at that point. But when it came to the game altogether, I don't want to harp on it too hard, mainly because it was out of the 5 games they played together, they only lost, out of the 6 games, they only lost 2. One of them against one of the best defensive teams in the NBA being the Miami Heat. And they both didn't even play bad that game. And then you have the one where James Harden puts up a stinker at home.
As a matter of fact, James Harden didn't even play against the Heat, I'm pretty sure. That he rested that game.
Okay. Then
so they lost
that
one.
Was their first loss together.
Yeah, that was their first loss.
So it was just very unfortunate timing. I wouldn't put that against them. I mean, what mainly sticks out to me is I just want to see what he does in the playoffs because James Harden always has that reputation of doing bad in the playoffs. if this became a playoff series and he put up I think he was 1 of 12, 2 of 12, 2 of 13 or something like that at halftime, that's when you can put up some real concern. But with this being their first loss together, I think, quote me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, you're right.
And I wouldn't really, it's just very unfortunate timing. Very unfortunate timing.
Yeah, I was doing the watch parties today. We were talking a little bit about James Harden, because I try my hardest not to get sucked into the playoff choker thing. But somebody asked me, they were like, name James Harden's clutch moments in the playoffs, and I said, his block on Lou Dort in the bubble.
That's the first thing I thought of too.
And then I started thinking a bit harder. Somebody had I knew he probably had some obscure shot when he was playing with the Thunder, but I couldn't think back that far. That was before anybody was really paying attention to Harden. So he did have a shot against the Spurs back then. And I was just thinking though, and first of all, just because we discussed like actual basketball in this podcast, James Harden as a playoff performer overall, like he's good. He's got the stats there. Like as an overall playoff performer, he's straight. It's the biggest moments that kind of stain it, i.e. probably the worst game of his career against the San Antonio Spurs when they were at home against Houston that year. I think it was 2017 probably. And somebody
blocked from behind with Ginobili.
Yeah, and somebody didn't even play that game for San Antonio. I can't remember. Anyways, it was a terrible performance there. Being part of the misses, the 27 straight misses against the Golden State Warriors. There's that.
You can even add him getting benched by Kevin McHale in Game 6 against the Clippers, where they came back with Josh Smith and Corey Brewer. Because he had a really bad game that day, and everybody was like, "Oh, we got it in the bag," and then all they had to do was just take out the main guy that was messing it up for everybody, and the bench got it done.
Right. So this is a regular season game, like you said. It's not something that you put all the stock into. However, it just is kind of a worry that this was a big regular season game. This is against a team that you might see in a month. Fair. This is Ben Simmons. He wasn't really there. That was just a subplot. Ben Simmons return, whatever. This is against your old team. It just feels like there are certain superstars that are fired up and super aggressive in that type of matchup. Like a Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant was fired. Kevin Durant and Embiid were jawing at each other, and it all went downhill from the Sixers from there. But KD and Kyrie, they were ready. They were out for blood that game. They're like, okay, they're fucking with our boys. This is Ben Simmons. We got to come out here and show out for him. They came out for blood. Harden, on the other hand, is a little bit nonchalant. Couldn't really get to what he wanted to. Wasn't getting the fouls. Like when he couldn't blow by somebody, he looked for a foul, didn't really get it. And it kind of stuck out that, man, this is all too often when it's something really big. Harden just kind of seems, he's a great basketball player, but it's like that small separation between great basketball player and the ones that are really, really with the shits in those type of moments. And I don't know, I'm not questioning his commitment or anything.
Going off of that, what do you think about him going to the club right after with I think it was Lil Baby and Travis Scott? I think he was celebrating one of their birthdays or something, like right after that game.
Now that I saw somebody ask on their story, it was actually a great question. I thought about posting it on Twitter as a poll. It said, does James Harden have a lack of commitment? And that was A, or B, does he have a great work-life balance? And I was like, okay, you know what?
Okay, that second choice is actually something to consider.
Because I know we all love the stories about, oh, this player lost his game and he didn't leave the gym until 12. We've been not brainwashed, but we love Kobe type stories. But every star is not Kobe, to where he sleeps 3 hours or 4 hours and everything was basketball for him, and then he can go party with somebody, but also go everything that Kobe did. Not everybody's Kobe. Right. Not everybody treats it the same. I guess it's just the optics. It's not. I have a saying that I always say on this podcast and in my videos: everything in life is optics. It's not great optics of getting snuffed by your old team and you played horrible, and then being out with Baby and them who were sitting courtside. That's also not good optics, because over the summer we saw him with a Lil Baby like everywhere. That became a meme of its own. I think it's bad optics, but I'm also willing to buy for Harden work-life balance. However, again, I do worry. Like a first round series against Nets and Sixers should mean something. That should, for every superstar involved in that, they should all be out there like ready and laser focused and have their aggression fine tuned. And that's why I brought up the thing we were talking about earlier with Doc and James. And I was saying, man, if there's a collapse, or if there's like a first round collapse and they get snuffed by the Nets, and Harden had these great debuts with the Sixers, and all of a sudden he's not there, that's gonna be a terrible look. But there's X's and O's things to figure out with that. Like you mentioned Tobias Harris, and Doc Rivers wanting to keep those guys out there because, again, their bench is actually not that great. Yeah, Harris is a big part of this, bro. Harris is a big part of this, and in that Nets game for a while, he was just existing. He was just taking up air, basically.
He wasn't getting touches, and I'm like, some guys can strive in that, but I wouldn't consider Tobias Harris as someone that can just sit in the corner and just wait for a shot like a Danny Green or Matisse Thybulle. But at least somebody like a Matisse Thybulle, let me go and give it his credit. When he sees Joel Embiid with the ball on the perimeter, that dude's cutting right there. There's been many a times where Joel Embiid has given a nice little pass to Matisse Thybulle, who likes to cut right to the rim and just get his easy dunk. Because his scoring numbers been up just very marginally when James Harden's been there. Because, he's been able to open up shots for everybody. But some people aren't really able to exist in those type of roles. And Tobias Harris is one of them. Tyrese Maxey's numbers have been going up with them there because he's able to open up opportunities for him. But it doesn't open up opportunities for everybody. And Tobias Harris is unfortunately that unlucky link there with that.
Yeah, and that's a good point because a lot of it can just be jokes for Tobias, but you also remember, hell, in 2019, he was a part of that really good Sixers team. He was one of the reasons that team was really good. That was a different Tobias Harris. And yes, this is kind of a different rule. You'll see him standing in the corner often. James Harden has encouraged him to shoot no matter how many he misses, but because that could throw a player's rhythm off. Now, granted, Tobias Harris hadn't been good this season, but for the amount of money he's making, he hasn't really been good this season for the Sixers.
They try to make a decision with him and Jimmy Butler, and obviously we saw the one that they went with.
Yeah, and I was actually just watching Jimmy talk about his Sixer exit. Yeah, he said basically they had him fucked up. He said something about
they said it was. He said either he leaves or he said Brett Brown leaves or he leaves, and I'm like, I can imagine why he made that ultimatum because him and Brett Brown just did not work out. They didn't have the same philosophy because I think he was there for tenure reasons because he was there ever since all of them came in and was able to bring them to the playoffs and everything. But I'm like, I don't think he'd be the coach of the future for y'all. Because he was legitimately just brought in to be part of the process with them.
Right. Yeah, I did. I was actually just watching all of that. That's a whole adventure with Brett Brown and what that offense used to be. But speaking of offense, I think another thing that we saw in this game and what was kind of exposed is, well, not even exposed, just it sheds a light on it. Tyrese Maxey has been able to exist in this new role next to James Harden, and he's done it really well. But that's because James Harden has also played really well in those games. This was Harden's first bad game, to be fair. This is his first really bad game with the Sixers. But because he played bad, Tyrese Maxey also couldn't really get anything going. You've already more or less taken the ball out of his hand. So if Harden is not getting you transition looks, or if he's not commanding certain attention, if he doesn't have it going, it shows how in that role it could be hard for Tyrese Maxey to get it going too. He might not just be okay, you know what, Harden sucks tonight, throw Tyrese Maxey the ball and that he can fill in. Maybe there will be some nights like that, but against the Nets, and credit to the Nets defense, by the way, we're doing all the talking about the Sixers. The Nets, the last couple of games, they've had it going on the defensive end, and they especially had it going that night. Drummond picked up quick fouls, but I thought there was great points where they did not just let Embiid get to the post. They were showing help, and Drummond has also, even though he can't hold Embiid, nobody really can, he's been, dare I say, solid as a big body defensively for the Nets so far. He's been good for them. He ate the Knicks up today, but that's a totally different thing. I guess with
I always say that defense is more effort oriented than it is skill oriented, and some of these guys just don't want to simply put the effort in there. Because we see it all the time with some of these guys. They're just kind of like just there, or they don't put as much effort as they always could be. Because somebody like a Kevin Durant, who has like the length and the vitals to do it, he's not someone who's going to be like, yeah, I'm not going to go out there and give you 2 blocks a game. Now, we'll see it sometimes where if you make it obvious for him, he's going to get you a block. And his full defensive capabilities wasn't unlocked until he had a coach like Steve Kerr that forced him to play defense. Like I said, sometimes he'll do it every once in a while with the Nets, but even like what you said with Joel Embiid, sometimes it's just an effort thing because their team doesn't really have a lot of defensive people that can go out there and do some stuff for you and lock down somebody. Even, even have some weird people like who used to be there, DeAndre Bembry and Bruce Brown, who's like 6'5" or 4, going out there playing power forward for you. Like I said, if you got the heart and soul to play some defense, you can be a good defensive player, or even a good defensive team with a team that was the worst defensive team we have ever seen NBA wise, analytics wise, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
I don't remember what that stat was.
Right. And I did want to give Bruce Brown his clout earlier because you were talking about cutters earlier with Matisse Thybulle. You saw specifically in the Nets game. Bruce Brown, first of all, has been on a hot streak shooting the three. That still doesn't really necessarily change that teams will want to leave him open and want him to shoot it. But there was nasty lineups today in that Knicks game where you had Bruce Brown, Andre Drummond. Who else was I don't know. The lineups were nasty. Either way, the space was messed up. But Bruce Brown kind of always knew where to cut and where to be. Knew how to find his way into like the middle area, basically, where he could get a floater up or a finish just so you couldn't totally kill the space around Kevin Durant like the Knicks were trying. So didn't want to give him his credit for that.
Andre Drummond, for some reason, that dude wants to be Jokic, because when he was playing behind Joel Embiid, you always see like the meme of him throwing like a behind the back pass and throwing it out of bounds. I'm like, hey, he's always been a decent passer, but sometimes he puts a little bit too much dip in his chip. And it's okay, can we calm down a little bit?
Yeah, no, he threw one straight out of bounds today in the fourth quarter. We had a good laugh about that, but
oh God.
Won't read too much into one game, obviously, but that is in what I said in the podcast myself last week, just what we've known in general. First of all, I do think eventually Kyrie is going to be back full time. He was courtside at the Nets game today. He was on the court at the end of the game. I don't know what's going to happen. Kyrie will probably, I think they're going to figure that out because it just looks stupid at this point. The optics are very dumb. So he'll probably be back. And the saying I've had is, it's nothing profound, but shot making is a wild card. And Kyrie and KD, I'm stuck with the Nets in between going, oh, none of those guys have played enough games this year. They haven't been together enough, or Ben Simmons hasn't even played yet, which I personally don't think he's going to play this season, but we'll see what happens with that. I'm stuck between going, that's what's going to hold them back, and then the other extreme being what we saw this week. And well, Kyrie can make any shot at any moment. That can happen. And Kevin Durant is literally, it's a cliche, but he actually is a cheat code because he can just pull up for a three with a hand in his face. He can totally destroy you in pick and roll. He can put your best defenders in some really, really bad positions, and he can open things up for everybody else. He even had like 9 or 10 assists today, playing damn near by himself. Seth Curry wasn't even playing, but he was able to draw so much attention. Just kind of happened like that. So first round, me as a Boston Celtics fan, I'm going, I don't really want a 1 or 2 seed, to be real with you. Yeah, and I like how they compete with the Nets, and we will probably, if we advance, we'd have to see them eventually. But also, I'm kind of cool around here at 4 or 5 playing Chicago, who's been trying to get healthy. If you're 1 or 2 in Miami and Milwaukee, just because you might have more chemistry than the Nets doesn't mean you want to game plan for Kevin Durant in the first round. So I'm not really clear on where to stand with them, and also because we know fuck all with Ben Simmons. Like they said today, he can't play one-on-one, right?
You know what the joke is with the Nets, right?
What's that?
That they'd rather be a 7th or 8th seed so they don't get home court advantage, and Kyrie can play 4 games if it went down to 7 rather than 3.
I remember that, yeah.
But what were you asking about Ben Simmons?
No, I was just saying, like, we know nothing with him because I believe I saw Woj talking about it, saying they don't have a timetable. They're talking about, he can't do one-on-one yet, and we are damn near the halfway point of March. It's hard for me to see going from here to, and maybe it changes in 2 or 3 weeks, but off of a back injury, it's hard for me to even, if he does come back, if you can't do one-on-one yet, how are you going to be full strength for the playoffs and learn a scheme? I don't know. But okay, take Ben Simmons out of the equation.
Yeah, he just mysteriously went out with the back injury when he came in, because as soon as he was having his, mental health thing, he immediately went with them to Miami on that away trip. And then he was, practicing his shot with Kyle Korver. And the next thing you know, we got the back injury thing. But again, that was very close to the Philadelphia game, just to add on to the fact that he just didn't want to play against them in that instance or whatever. So I don't know whether... Because I've had this conversation with somebody, and it was very controversial. I just didn't know if he was kind of like mildly faking what he was doing a little bit just to get out of Philadelphia. I don't know what your opinion is on that, if you want to, tell me about it.
Yeah, to be honest, I basically stayed away from that discourse because it's like there's one side and then there's the other, and it's like... Yeah, I feel my way about it, but I feel like on Twitter and where these things go, there's just no way to have a great conversation about it, honestly.
Yeah, I've had great conversations about this. It's just all about people not trying to just yell or
exactly,
a really strong opinion about it. But with me, I guess I want to put myself out there. With me, I was thinking he was kind of just faking it a little bit because he was trying to get out of there by any means necessary. He was willing to get himself knocked out of practice to not play, to make himself known that he does not want to play there. He did the mental health thing. He's even trying to sue the 76ers for the money that he lost due to his own choice of not being there. And he even was so out of money that he sold a house of his in Philadelphia just to have some while he was out. Like there was just a lot of things that just marked towards him just doing whatever it took to get out. Just kind of like what James Harden was doing when he wanted to get out of the Houston Rockets, causing like incidents in the locker room and in practice and stuff like that. Even though this time around it was a lot more passive aggressive than it was with the Houston Rockets.
Yeah, when that was a saga, I had basically said he dug a hole that he thought he was going to get out of quickly when he first requested a trade or whatever. I think he thought that was going to happen rather quickly. It ended badly, and at that point, when they lost last year, I think my last video was Ben Simmons and Embiid. Like this should be it for them basically, and there's no reason to go any further. So I think he thought it was going to happen a lot faster. When it didn't, it was a situation of, wow, I can never go back and play in Philly because that would be hell playing in front of that crowd. And
yeah, and then his teammates didn't help him either. Like I was having a conversation about how Joel Embiid did that one meme, showing up to his haters' funeral or something like that. And even Danny Green had an interview on a radio show in Philly saying how they was discussing what type of players you can get from in the locker room. And I'm like, damn, that's kind of fucked up. Saying like, oh, who's gonna get for this guy? Like, yeah. Kind of just already taking him out of these guys' brains and waiting for somebody else to come in. I'm like, but again, that's the team structure that you have with Doc Rivers. He's not exactly the best when it comes to bringing a team together. He's just all about business.
Yeah, it's funny how much Danny Green is aired out the Sixers locker room stuff this year while as it's going on. He's everywhere.
But again, there's no structure there because your coach is Cock Rivers, so he's just allowing all this stuff to happen.
Rivers, I have not heard that one.
I've been calling him that for the longest time. Don't mind me.
We will see going into the playoffs. They still have only had like one terrible game. That's James Harden's first terrible game. We'll see what they're able to put together for the playoffs. But that Nets and Sixers potential matchup does loom. So very interested to see where a lot of things land. Kyrie, Ben Simmons, and the seeding. But that's definitely what happened this week. Another thing that happened this week, I'm pretty sure it was this week after my podcast, the Sixers did end up playing the Bulls. However, the Bulls have been very hard to judge in most situations because they just haven't been healthy on one hand. So Caruso just came back finally. That's a great thing. That's a great step in the right direction. Still waiting on Lonzo. Vooch did not play the game against Embiid, so I think it was Tristan Thompson. That was an easy 40 ball to call. I felt like coming down to the end of the season, though, it's kind of tough. On one hand, you do want to shoot the Bulls and give them the leeway that you can and going, wow, they've just been trying. It's good on them for even being able to stay where they've been and all the guys that they've missed. On the other hand, some of these games that they're losing, they haven't beat that many good teams, though. Just in general, it kind of feels like in a lot of these matchups, and you start to look and say, well, a lot of teams this year have missed guys. Like teams all over the bracket have missed guys to COVID, or they've had guys in and out. That's happened to a lot of these teams. And when you look at just this string of L's that happened for the Bulls, you lose against Memphis, you lose against Philly, you lose against Milwaukee, you lose against Miami. Those are all teams, and you look at some of the scores, and not all of them are necessarily close. It starts to make you wonder if Chicago is that team that we thought they were coming into the year. Because how many I don't know. I wonder where you land on it, because I've kind of talked about it on the podcast before. Do you think that Caruso and Ball just immediately fix the issues that they've suffered in losing to these good teams? Do they solve a loss to Philly? Do they solve a loss to Miami? Or is it like, okay, we get them back, but the holes that were causing, or contributing to those losses are still there? How much have you weighed those absences when trying to figure out where the Bulls might land come playoff time?
I say, yeah, the more players you can have to be able to help your team, the better. Of course, it goes into that, but the fact they haven't got one win over a top-ranked team in either the East or the West is a really bad look. Now, of course, things can change come playoff time. Sometimes all it takes is just the best player on either team going off to be able to win a playoff series. We've seen that happen plenty of times. And we, even recently, we saw that with Giannis versus the Suns. No one really had the Suns doing anything. And then all it took was Giannis getting a couple 40 pieces and Chris Middleton having his moments. And that's all it really took for them to win. But when it comes to the Bulls, one main concern I've always had was Nikola Vucevic, because you have this team right now, in essence, that's very similar to like the Heat you have, DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, and then Nikola Vucevic. You have the LeBron role, the D-Wade role, the Chris Bosh role. Nikola Vucevic has not been playing the Chris Bosh role very well at all. Like he was having his struggles when it was just him and Zach. And then you bring in another guy taking the ball out of his hands in DeMar DeRozan, even though he's a great playmaker. He just hasn't been able to get very many good shots up. But I think he's one of the main struggles just because of him having an offensive role, but not playing in that offensive role very well. Because outside of that, you have those two, Kobe White, who can put the ball in the basket. Ayo sometimes can put the ball in the basket. But outside of that, there's not very many guys who can really go out there and get you a bucket. And when you have one of your main big three guys not able to do the same thing, it kind of cuts off the offensive potential. And then come playoff time, you're really going to need that. Because they're already pretty solid on defense. Lonzo, Javonte Green, Derrick Jones Jr. at times, and Alex Caruso. I forgot about him for a second. But outside of that, like I said, you don't really have a lot of good offensive versatility when this is a bunch of 3-and-D guys, and then your main center, who's already getting messed up in the paint in the first place, can't get you a bucket either.
Yeah, so coming into the season, I had questions about Vucevic for different reasons than you had it, because I assumed the shooting was going to be there. My whole thing with him was pick and roll defense. Our teams, and I know teams are still going to be testing this when it comes to the playoffs. Say if it was Nets and Bulls, you're absolutely going to have KD with the ball. Whoever's on Vucevic, man, come here, bring him up here, because we're going to test that. Even though I think he hasn't been as bad just in defense in general. This year as I thought he was going to be. Granted, that is one of that's one of the other issues, is that big man depth. That's why they went out and got Tristan Thompson, who this is not the old Tristan Thompson. That's not your guy that's you're gonna put out there and is stopping anybody. The days of the old Tristan Thompson with defense and rebounding at a great level. I think he gave them some good energy on the offensive end in his debut, but still they're just trying to shore that up a little bit, because behind them, who do you have? Like Tony Bradley, basically.
Tony Bradley and actually, I think it is just Tony Bradley.
Yeah, you've got big man issues if you're the Bulls and you're in a conference where you're gonna have to deal with a Giannis Antetokounmpo and a Joel Embiid, probably get out of it. So that's one thing. But it has kind of become twofold, because even if Vucevic has been solid there, the depth is an issue. And if you just look at his last, what am I looking at? It looks like I'm looking at his last 5 games. This man is shooting 23% from 3. So overall, the season he's shooting 30% from 3. Vooch as a big man. And he's had stretches where he was shooting the ball okay, and him and DeRozan were keeping the Bulls afloat. However, you start to look at what makes it into the scouting report in the playoffs. And in the playoffs, it becomes, we got to shrink this floor as much as possible and have as much defensive pressure as possible as we can on a Zach LaVine and a DeMar DeRozan. So you fucking betcha that they're gonna be looking and say, okay, Vooch has had issues this year. I've even seen games this year where Vooch, the crowd has urged him to shoot and he didn't. It's been points where it's like, he might be open for a 3. It's like, put that up. You got what's his name, the commentator for the Bulls, saying put that shit up. And sometimes it just don't happen. Teams are gonna be testing that. They're like, okay, in theory, Vooch is a stretch big, but also not in theory. In fact, DeMar DeRozan is maybe the best mid-range shooter in the game right now. If you let him get to his spot,
that should be undisputed between like him, Chris Paul, and D Book, honestly.
Right.
And Kevin Durant.
Yeah. I was just gonna let it slide. And when you're looking at how to do that, you're gonna say, all right, well, look, until Vooch shoots like 35% in a series or whatever, I think they're gonna be daring him. They're gonna be kind of daring a guy who in that role was brought there to not be dared. That was the whole point. It was a threat of it. So I'm very curious to see how they end up defending in that situation. But with Chicago, every week so far as we get closer to the playoffs, look, they got Caruso back, so now I'm starting to get more of a judgeful eye with them. Because before then, I'm like, okay, I will cut the slack of your best defender went out, and he was really important to that team's defense. So at least you can shore that up. I'd like to see them go against some contending teams healthy. I think they have the Heat on the schedule before it ends. They'll probably have Lonzo back for that. I want to see that before I say anything. But at the moment, just being where Boston is, I'm going, okay, well, you got Philly up there with Embiid, you got the Bucks, you got the Heat, and you got Boston down here. I would, like, because the Cavaliers at this point, it seems like playing them is going to end up being out of the question in the first round. Out of what's left, I'm not mad if we get Chicago in the first round. I think we can be competitive with them and or beat them. I think there's scheme ways to do that. And
Robert Williams have a lot of switchability with those guys down there in the paint, so.
Yeah, exactly. And that I don't know. That's just kind of where I'm at with the Chicago Bulls at the moment. They could still theoretically move up. They are right there for the 2 seed as well, which again, that puts you in danger territory, because now that becomes really fun. A Kyrie and KD versus Chicago team in the first round. That becomes fun.
And they beat them every single time pretty convincingly.
Yeah, so that's it's fun for the Bulls. The good thing is, I mean, I think Bulls fans are taking it well, because I see them on my timeline. I follow a lot of them, and even the main ones that you see on there are kind of like, yeah, this, nothing is really inspiring confidence at the specific moment if you're the Chicago Bulls. And the fact that look, when I always go back to the 2010 Celtics just because I remember that season so well, but when they weren't really beating great teams that season, it was different. They had been there before. They'd won a championship. Yeah, the veteran presence. You already knew what they were about.
First iteration of this team we've seen.
Exactly. Yeah, you knew what that team was about. When it's the first iterations, it's like, okay, if you hadn't really done this in the regular season, I don't know how to be this confident about you going into the playoffs. But that's basically where I land with Chicago Bulls at the moment. Just get healthy so I can really start drawing some conclusions. At the moment, like a lot of teams, it's just kind of difficult. Looking at the Western Conference, so this Mavs team has been surprising. They are on a collision course with the Jazz and finally playing a different team in the playoffs. That is something that it looks like can happen. And that matchup actually happened this week. That matchup between the Mavs and Jazz happened. I'm not sure if it's going to happen again. After today, Dallas is a half a game behind them, so they're looking to take home court in that series if it does happen. Okay, you've had experience with your team against Luka in the playoffs twice. You know what Luka ball is about. The Mavericks have totally committed to it by getting Spencer Dinwiddie and Davis Bertans out there, but mostly Dinwiddie as a creator and somebody to space the floor.
I've been surprised with Dinwiddie. I'm not even gonna lie.
Oh yeah,
I don't know. Maybe it was just the switch from Dallas to Washington, because I know Washington had their issues, because even Montrezl Harrell, when he went to Charlotte, he was like, "This is the most fun I've had playing basketball in forever." And I'm like, yeah, that shows what was going on in Washington.
Yeah, just not good things. Not good things, obviously. That team is probably about to miss the playoffs, but hey, Kuzball is fun still.
Kuzball is fun.
Knowing what you know about Dallas in the playoffs in these last couple of years and where they are right now, how are you feeling about this potential 4-5 matchup? Because I'm starting to really key in on this, and then just to recap, in this week they played and Dallas got on them early, and specifically it's really death, and it's part of Luka ball, but it's death by 1,000 pick and rolls. They want your big man guarding Luka. They want your big man switched on to Luka, and the Jazz happen to employ Rudy Gobert, who out of all the guys that he would have to switch on to, at least Luka isn't the fastest. That kind of helps him. But then there's the Hassan Whiteside minutes, and he cannot move like that against guys with the basketball, and he was getting torn up. How do you feel about the Mavs and Jazz series potentially though? And if you saw any of what happened this week, then you can speak on that too.
Yeah, I will go on and say right now, 2 straight years of dealing with Luka. I will say the main difference between the Clippers going against Luka and what will potentially happen with the Jazz, I'm gonna be completely honest, because this is something that a lot of Clippers fans don't want to talk about. Marcus Morris kind of injured the dude a little bit to make sure that we would win those games. There's been many of rough fouls and a lot of pushing and awkward falls with him around him that's happened, that comes up over and over again. And I remember watching that series and I'm like, if he gets injured, it's low-key a checkmate. And I know exactly why. It's because Marcus Morris, because he had a couple of bad moments this year. I believe he knocked out Ja Morant in the air one time on a dunk attempt, and I'm like, oh my god. Because if just imagine he gets expelled from the league or something just off of that. Just if you get that in the playoff series, that just be the reason we win right there, and everybody would be thinking it's fraudulent. But going back into what we was talking about, that's the main difference between the Jazz and the Clippers in that first round series. Just the amount of contact you can apply on Luka to make him do other things. The Jazz don't exactly have that type of defensive capability when it even comes to talent in the first place. Joe Ingles is now gone. Bojan is getting older. Royce O'Neal hasn't been impressive. He's more of a gnat as a defender than he is an actual good defender. But that's kind of what you have to do as a small market team. You have to get those type of no-name guys to make them good. And then even someone like a Daniel House, same thing, even though he's a little bit younger. They don't really have the defensive capabilities to even deal with Luka in the first place. So you're just going to have to pick your poison on what's going to happen in the playoffs, because come playoff time, like you said, death by 1,000 pick and rolls. I saw Zubac looking stupid against them, and the same thing's going to happen with Gobert. You're just going to have to see what happens and hope they just don't shoot. Because the main thing that's been killing Luka in the playoffs is the fact that his teammates can't keep up. But we're seeing now, like you said, with Dinwiddie, Davis Bertans coming back into what he was doing in San Antonio, and Jalen Brunson having his breakout year. I think this might actually be a legitimate year for them to actually do something this year, since they have better people out there. You know, there's not going to be any more chemistry issues with Porzingis. Luka is now undisputably the alpha dog out there on that team. He decides what happens out there. There's not going to be any issues about give me the ball. It's like Luka, bunch of role players, you know, kind of reminiscent, even though to I'm going to say to a greater extent with like LeBron out there in his early days. Just him and a bunch of shooters. They all know their role. Let's go out there and create something. But when it comes to, again, just the defense, they're not going to be able to handle him at all. You know, granted, again, the Clippers were roughing him up, but I don't feel like they're going to go that down and dirty to try to win a game against them. And plus, their defense has been very impressive too. After Porzingis left for some reason, but
yeah, well, that's the thing. That's the thing. Their defense, they've basically been a top defensive team most of the year, and Porzingis has been out for a lot of that as well. Even though when he was there, I thought he was very important to their rim protection. He was important to their rim protection. But I
just want to say real quick, he was the same guy that blew a game winner against the Clippers.
Yeah, I saw that.
The Wizards against, who was it? I think it was Amir Coffey, who's almost a whole foot shorter than him.
I saw that. The post up off the backboard just couldn't quite angle it correctly. The backboard is tricky, man. The backboard is tricky. You either get.
Yeah, I'm just going to say it right now. That's very telling of his game.
Yeah,
everybody's always been like, because I know you know it. Marcus Smart over here, making sure he doesn't get into the paint. There's plenty of pictures of him trying to post up Marcus Smart and nothing happens from it.
Oh yeah. Posting up has never been Porzingis' thing, and that's one of the reasons I think the Mavericks got rid of him, is because you go, well, all right, and he wasn't shooting the 3-ball great with the Mavericks either. So it's like, all right, you got to be a part of this Lucas scheme, or you got to be able to bring your own element. And I think he wasn't bringing it to a star level. I just didn't see him going for the pieces that he went for. I could see him getting traded. I guess I just didn't, and I didn't know they were looking to move him this year. However, I didn't think it was going to go for what it did. However, because it did, you were talking about comparisons in teams for Luka ball when we were doing, because we did a watch party for Mavs Celtics today as well, and especially post trade, I'm saying, man, this looks to me exactly like the 2017 Rockets, because before this it would have been, it was flipped. Like the 2017 Rockets were a top offensive team but a very average defensive team. Before the trade, the Dallas Mavericks were a top defensive team but an average offensive team. Since that trade, I think they're ranked very high offensively, and it's because it's literally exactly how Harden and them used to play. It's like, all right, well, you know, there's very little you could do with James Harden back then, especially with the fouls. Very little you could do to stop him. So what do you eventually end up doing? You end up sending two to the ball. All of a sudden the ball is swinging and you got shooters everywhere. That's exactly what's happening with Dallas right now, because that's what we did when he started to heat up today in Boston, and he was trying his hardest to hunt Robert Williams, specifically Williams, because Horford was holding his own, and Williams held his own for a while as well, but that's still what they wanted. And at a certain point when the game started getting to crunch time, they're like, all right, we're blitzing these, we're doubling these, but as soon as you do that, somebody on that team is getting an open three. There's no defense fast enough to stop once the ball swings from Luka. Somebody on the team is getting an open three. Today it was Dorian Finney-Smith from the corner, but there's the options for Dinwiddie as well, who didn't shoot well today, but again, that's just the scheme now. That type of basketball, I think, is only good enough to get past the first round if you catch fire, basically. So,
well, sometimes, because he was averaging like 36, 37 in the first round last year, and I think a little bit less than the year before. Sometimes it just comes down to who's the best player on the court.
Yeah.
And, again, his teammates were the ones that were losing him these games in the playoffs. It was never him, minus a couple of times. But again, that's when we had the Marcus Morris roughing him up and making him worse and worse every game.
Right.
So when that element is gone, I'm sure he's going to be out there consistently trying to hit you for 30, 40 and seeing what happens. Because like I said, now we have a lot more chemistry with all of his players out there. So I actually feel like this could be a sneaky team to actually make the finals, just like really? A little bit sneaky.
Okay.
Just off of their personnel and the fact they aren't going against someone who wants to injure them every game.
Hey,
because that's exactly what happened with Donovan Mitchell in the second round. Same exact story. Yeah. He messed up his leg, and then he was still putting up 40, but he was a little bit less effective due to that.
Right. Yeah, I've heard that a couple of times, and I'm not getting there, but I've heard that from a couple of people when they start talking about sneak teams or dark teams or whatever. Looking at the Mavericks, I'm going, all right, you can first of all, you can totally sell me on a first round beating against the Jazz. I can see that simply because they're gonna go in. I wonder how much they're gonna end up playing us on Whiteside when Gobert is not on the floor. The thing about the Jazz though is they don't have a great small ball lineup that allows them to do the things that they want to do. So how are you gonna? What?
Unless you want Eric Pascal out there trying to run the 5, and he's like bigger, so like bigger in weight, so he's not gonna be able to really run like that neither.
Yeah, so they don't really have the element to do that. Therefore, you don't have the elements to say, well, we're just not gonna play a Hassan Whiteside when Gobert is not there. Therefore, Hassan Whiteside is going to spend the better part of a week and a half getting put on Spencer Dinwiddie, getting put on Luka, and that is just, those are going to be some interesting minutes should it play out like that. And then I'm really interested to see the Luka and Gobert matchup, because when they played the week before that, Gobert had some plays where he stayed with him nicely, just because we know that he has length, we know that he doesn't have great foot speed, and Luka doesn't really kill you by foot speed. He kills you by stepping back or, you know, forcing you to double him and then swinging. Those are the things.
Yes. So that finesse too. He has a lot of finesse.
Oh yeah, exactly. He's got great finesse, but it's not the small quick guard that's just going to blow by Rudy when he's, you know, when he can't move laterally. So I'm very interested to see that matchup. But okay, yeah, you could sell me on that. You could totally sell me on Dallas getting past Utah this year. After that, though, you end up playing the Suns. It just, fam, if that happens, look, bro, somebody knew better than me.
DeAndre Ayton might actually go out there and get a consistent 30 piece. Not gonna lie, might be a lot of lobs from Chris Paul to DeAndre Ayton.
Yeah, man. So somebody just knew better than me if they beat the Suns in the first round. That's why I can't even get to the sneak part. But that's how people are, you know, potentially looking at them. So that will be interesting to see. But man, I'm so hyped to see Luka ball against a different team than the Clippers, because that's a hard matchup, especially for your first 2 playoff series ever. Not just PG and Kawhi, but as you were saying, Morris. That's a tough bid, basically.
He has a hatred for the Clippers, bro. Him and Terrence Mann were jaw-jacking the last game. It was crazy.
Facts. Yeah, so that's basically and since that was a matchup this week, I definitely wanted to hit on the Mavericks and Jazz. As we are looking, which way should I go with? Yeah, since it's teams oriented, then we'll get to a couple of players before we end. Everyone's ignoring the Timberwolves. I say that because, and I've talked about them a couple of times on my podcast, but it seems almost won 40 games. I argue if they were a healthy team this year, they could have maybe cracked 50. They're probably not going to crack 50 with only 13 games. Yeah, that's not going to happen. That went a 10 of 13. But I've liked, yeah, hey, you know what? Who knows? But Minnesota play-in team right now, 7 seed. But they've looked good, like defensively, not the best defensive team out there, but you got defenders and a Jared Vanderbilt. I don't care. You've been a Clippers fan, so I don't know your opinion on Patrick Beverley, but I've always reiterated I'll take him on my squads, and I've liked him on the Timberwolves.
I would not want to go against him, no.
Anthony Edwards is taking a jump in his second year. That's great. You put him with D. Russ. Cat is having a great shooting year, and in the one good year that Minnesota has had without having to have a guy like Jimmy Butler or whatever, being completely ignored at the moment. And I guess it's probably just because nobody fears them doing anything more than winning a game, maybe against the Memphis Grizzlies or the Warriors in the first round. Although I will say Cat versus Golden State in the first round would be a lot of fun. Cat versus Kevon Looney. Yeah, that would be fun. But
I know your history with Kevon Looney now.
Right. Yeah, had you been having Minnesota Timberwolves thoughts this year? Because
I love their team. The one thing I do like to talk about though is the fact that Anthony Edwards, I don't know if you knew this, but Anthony Edwards takes more shots per game than Cat. And I wonder what the dynamic between them is, because we've seen a couple of like clips of him being frustrated with the type of shots that Anthony Edwards puts up. And I'm like, okay, so is he going to be the future, or he's just more ball dominant since he's the guard and he's obviously going to get the ball first before Cat does as the center? But between that team, like I said, this is what I love about small market teams that work out, because they have to go the extra mile to make things happen. You got Malik Beasley, who came in via trade. You have a couple other players that came in as an unrestricted free agent or through the draft. You got Jared Vanderbilt. I think he came from a trade too. Patrick Beverley came in through a trade. They just gave him a contract extension. Same thing with D'Angelo Russell. And he's been an amazing third piece for them, just as a guy who can give the occasional ISO and give you a nice little 3-ball. But again, the one thing I want to know for the future is what's going to happen with Cat and Anthony Edwards. There we go. I keep saying Anthony Russell for some reason, but Anthony Edwards, because those two together are a great team, are a great duo. But it's just like, are they going to figure out who's going to be the one and who's going to be the two when it comes to the totem pole? Because Anthony Edwards in his second season is shooting more than Cat, who's been there for 6-7 years already.
Yeah, and so I took a look at that because that's something I hadn't fully keyed in on. He is taking one more shot than him at the moment. He is up to 17 and a half field goal attempts per game, Cat 16. So he is definitely getting them up. I would say, and specifically this year with the Wolves winning, I would say that's already part of the maturation for Cat, because he's spent most of his career playing on this team that's doing jack shit basically. For how long? God, he's been around since the 2015 draft now. Yeah, Cat was drafted in 2015. So it was starting to get to a point where, okay, one more super losing season in Minnesota and we're gonna start hearing rumblings about Cat winning out and how Cat gets out. So I kind of feel like it's definitely welcome, because he's played years now getting his stats and being one of the statistically best big men in the league and making all-star teams, but not making the playoffs, not coming close to the playoffs, not having anything to build with. I'd fully welcome Anthony Edwards coming in and taking that pressure off while actually being a winning team. I think it would be one thing if they were sub 500 or they, again, once weren't looking at the playoffs and now he's just taking these shots. With them being 7th, with, by the way, a chance to get out of the play-in. If Denver takes a couple of funny losses and Minnesota they can actually get out of the play-in, which would be a lot of fun now, because oh my gosh, Jokic in the play-in, LeBron in the play-in, and then whatever happens with the Pelicans, that'd be a lot of fun. But yeah, that's kind of where I see it with Minnesota. At this point, I'm just kind of eyeing them and waiting to see what their matchup is going to be. On one hand, and Kevon Looney does hold his own against some matchups. I think he held his own against Jokic this week. So it'd be fun to see what they did with that. But it'd also be fun to see, Cat and how he defends and pick and roll with, Steph out there and Clay out there. That would be a lot of fun in a matchup like that as well. I don't think they beat the Warriors for any reason. I wouldn't really see that. But yeah, I did just want to bring the Minnesota Timberwolves up for sure, because they have...
Oh yeah, they got a really sneaky big three. I've been enjoying watching them all season, just with how they all play together and how they have their roles all figured out. Again, with Anthony Edwards being the main guy, Cat being the main guy, and D'Lo just enjoying his role as the third one, and then everybody else out there playing defense and throwing up threes.
Yeah, exactly. That's literally that is this team. That's what they have. And to see them be able to accept their roles like that, like D'Angelo Russell, has been around to a couple of teams. Now he's here and he's this role is come in and score and distribute a little bit. He's doing a great job at that. And so next season, I'm definitely looking at another step for Anthony Edwards, that year 3 jump, maybe like Ja Morant has at the moment. He's got that year 3 jump where he's jumped into that MVP candidate like that. Edwards has that same type of go to him. Like I could see that in year 3.
Yeah, because with me as a person who plays basketball, it's one thing to dominate or play well in college, but it's another thing as a guard, a smaller guard, or just being a guard in general, to go out there and play against NBA level talent on a night-to-night basis. Because I don't really mind it where people as guards have a struggle in their first or two couple of seasons, because you have to get used to playing against guys that are bigger than you, stronger than you, because you got to get your weight up and everything. Even though Anthony Edwards coming into the NBA, dude was looking like a football player, so I didn't think he was going to have any real issues dealing with the physicality and everything. Getting that one highlight play last year on Yuta Watanabe that pretty much shows that he's physically dominant anyways. But, you got to get used to playing at the NBA level. So when guards come in and struggle, everybody's always talking about them being a bust-off rip. I'm like, you have to let them, grow into their own bodies and wait for them to actually go out there and get used to playing NBA-level defenses. They haven't played against this type of stuff before. Most of them.
Yeah, for sure. I am looking for them this year in terms of that type of maturation, and it's obviously going great for Anthony Edwards. He's already at star level. He should definitely be an all-star next year. I'm hoping they can either play their way into the playoffs or just avoid the play-in overall, so they can get that type of experience under them as that group with Cat, with Anthony Edwards. So when you come into next season, maybe whatever happens in the off season, you take that same type of jump that the Grizzlies took from a bottom play-in team to all of a sudden, all right, we're here now, because you got the pieces. Cat is one of the best big men in the NBA. Anthony Edwards becomes one of the best shooting guards in the NBA, and Russell's your third, and now you've got a great defensive base with defense pieces around you. That's a recipe for a team that can really ascend. So that's pretty much the storyline that I'm following with the Minnesota Timberwolves this year, and we'll see if they're able to finish the season out and take it into the playoffs. One of the couple of last topics we have here, and when I wrote it down, I wrote it as what's keeping Giannis out of serious MVP discussion. And by serious, I meant every night it's Jokic or Embiid, and it's almost as if Giannis is being disregarded. Then I woke up today and the MVP ladder says he's actually tied for second. I'd never seen a tie before in the ladder. I guess I just don't pay attention to it enough. But he's tied now, so okay. He, as far as the voting and whatnot, he actually is being taken pretty seriously. But just as the discussion, us as NBA fans, NBA media, and it has seemed that Giannis has been disregarded. Whenever I do the podcast, I try to throw it out there that hey, he's still there in number 3, and the Bucks are almost first seed, so he could jump both of your guys. That could happen, even though the Nuggets have a very close record, so seeding doesn't all the way matter. What has it been for you this year in thinking about Giannis with the MVP discussion and how it's almost been exclusively Jokic or Embiid when this guy is doing it on both ends? Giannis is a Defensive Player of the Year candidate on top of everything he normally does. From the eye, it's been a while since I stat watched with him, but from the eye, it seems like the mid range has definitely been an improvement this year for him. But again, it's more or less felt like a 2-man race, and then everybody else. It feels like Giannis falls into that DeMar and Ja Morant category when those two are not really in the Giannis category, in my opinion, overall for the season.
Now, for me and Giannis, I already know what will come down to it. It's just media fatigue, if that's one thing. Now, for another thing, I've always said the whole time, like come that All-Star weekend time, that whoever takes over the East, if they get like a couple of games, is probably gonna be the MVP. Unfortunately, right now, it's the Heat right now, right? Yeah, it's the Heat. So I don't think anyone's going to be out there giving it to Jimmy Butler or whatever. So then it might be going to more of a Jokic, has the, well, even though he doesn't get talked about that much on the media, but who has the media backing of, he has to help carry his team again because Jamal Murray and MPJ were out the whole time and yada, yada, yada. But if it was, for me, I've always been saying the same thing. If the 76ers or the Bucks can take that first seed, it's either Joel Embiid or Giannis. If they don't, I'm saying it's probably going to be in Jokic, because statistics wise, he isn't taking another jump, but just due to what he's doing right now and at the level of play he's having to do right now, I would probably give it to him if it wasn't those two. Mainly just off of the backing that they're not taking over the East, because the East is a whole lot more competitive than what the West is right now, just off of all the injuries that's happening there and just how, I'm just going to say, wonky it can be at times, because you have the dominant team in the Suns, the tier 2 team in the Golden State Warriors, and the Memphis Grizzlies, and even the Warriors right now, mainly because of Steph not getting his shot down and Draymond Green being out, are struggling right now. I think they're on a 3-game winning streak, but before then, I think they lost their last 5 out of 7 games or something crazy like that. So they did. And then you have, the other teams down there like the Mavericks, Jazz, and Nuggets, and then, the play-in teams.
Right.
But the dynamic up there in the East, it's like anyone can take the first seed up there. And if you're able to come out on top, honestly, the MVP probably should be yours if you're one of the dominant players. Because people were saying that about DeMar DeRozan, but now we see right now with the Bulls, and plus they don't really win games against good teams. You can use that against them too. That he could have potentially been an MVP candidate too, because I think he was averaging damn near 30 points a game at one point.
I have for sure wondered about the dynamics, because there's so many different dynamics with it. There's the voter part, and it's specific. That also goes with Jokic now trying to repeat, because it's extremely hard to repeat. So there's that. Right. There's a seeding that goes into it. There's a narrative. There's stats. There's so many. And one of them that I've always thought was pretty important is the seeding. And this year, I would say I was definitely more thinking what you were thinking until I really started to pay attention and go, oh damn, okay, the Bucks could end up first seed. Right now they have 42 wins. The Nuggets have 40. So yeah, sure, the Bucks might end up first and Denver might end up 6th, but those records still might be right there. So sure. I wonder how much they're going to count that, and also the dynamic with Jokic trying to repeat, because I think that's part of why you see now Giannis is tied with Embiid. All of a sudden, he's overtaken him in the standings. So that definitely shows why he's overtaken Embiid for sure. His team is now above him. I'm sure that has something to do with it.
It's the same thing like last year. He's almost averaging a triple-double, and his rebounds per game went up. In fact, I have a very strong opinion about rebounds. Is his offensive rebound staying up? Nope, it's just his defensive rebounds. But I guess some people like the stats, so it looks a lot more prettier.
Right. It's gonna be that I can't wait to see how it turns out, because I'd been just kind of hinting at it that it's okay. In all seriousness, yeah. Until you could get Milwaukee, because Giannis has already won MVP before. He's won it a couple of times. Until Milwaukee could get up there in the standings, yes, I was 100%. This is Embiid and this is Jokic and this is everybody else. Now that the Bucks have thrown themselves up there, especially if they were to. Miami's been first so long. If Milwaukee was to somehow overtake them 2.5 games in the last 15 that we have left, you assume Giannis has something major to do with that. That he might end up sneaking this, and that would just be hilarious. I think the internet would have a collective meltdown just because
anyone would be mad because it's Giannis, but at the same time, though, I can imagine why. I mean, if it was me, I'd be like, good for him. You know, he took over the East, and you know he's having another dominant season. A lot of his teammates, unfortunately, went down too, so you can even add that onto it.
Right.
But I mean, I can't really see where people would be mad at it unless they were like super supporters of that player or team. You have a lot of those online.
Oh yeah, no, I just thought it would be specifically because it's for those of us that work with the NBA and we're looking at it every day. Yeah, Giannis has been right there the whole time, just waiting to kind of pounce. But again, I even did the poll the other day, got a really decent amount of votes, and Giannis was like a distant third behind Jokic and Embiid. And that was literally a couple of days ago. And so from there, I feel like people have been having this big man. Even tomorrow, the matchup is Giannis and Embiid. We're looking. You know, a lot of people are like, "Oh, this is the MVP match right here," and then Giannis ends up taking it. I think there would probably end up being rage because it would be funny because you can't ask where the fuck did he come from. You can't ask that question. He's been dominant this season. He's been dominant.
He just hasn't had the best luck with his teammates being injured because Brook Lopez is gone, Pat Connaughton was gone at one point, Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton were gone, and the dude was starting at center. It was a mess at the beginning of the season, but now they're starting to get that momentum as a team together.
Yeah. Shout out to them. Even though it was a weird game last week, after I recorded my podcast where the Bucks nearly lost to the completely starless Suns, that was interesting. And then Middleton just hates the Suns. He turned into prime Jordan basically. It was incredible to watch. But we'll see how it finishes. That's again just like when we were talking about the Nets earlier. There's question marks everywhere. Got to see where everything lands. That is exactly where we are with the MVP discussion. But tomorrow should answer some questions, and I will write Doc Rivers an extremely strongly worded email if he rests Joel Embiid tomorrow against Jokic, because come on, bro.
I don't see why. I mean, what was the one game? Because they didn't Stephen Curry and somebody else get rested versus like the Grizzlies or something a couple days ago.
Nah, he got rested. I can't. Oh, it was against the Nuggets. They all rested against the Nuggets. Yeah.
So I was like, why in the world would they ever do that? I guess they don't really care about the playoff standing anymore. It's just like we're just going to beat whoever comes in front of us, basically.
Yeah, the Warriors are a vet team. Oh god damn! Before I was about to move subjects, but you mentioned Jimmy Butler. I did want to ask you. This one wasn't on the sheet, but I remembered what I was trying to look up on cleaningtheglass.com earlier from stream. Jimmy, the Miami Heat first seed, great team, great deep team, but Jimmy definitely, if they are to go anywhere, Jimmy has a lot to do with that success. There's no world where the Miami Heat go far and Jimmy was playing like trash, or he scored 6 points. That's not gonna happen. We were talking about playoffs and scouting reports earlier. Shooting 20% from 3 this year. Mid-range, he's only shooting 39%. Now, he finishes very well, so that's been his thing all year, but that is the one thing I'm looking at. And I just, from the start this year when I started talking about the Miami Heat, I like Jimmy Butler, but I've just always kind of wondered, when it comes down to, and especially this year, this is just a, God, can it really, is that actually true? God damn, really? He's been shooting bad for a minute, but yeah. Okay, that's the question that I have with the Heat for the playoffs, because yes, Tyler Hero, they have many options, and you're getting Victor Oladipo back too. That's another creator with the ball. I think that's important. But boy, if Jimmy cannot have like star level series sometimes, and if they're able to use him against his squad because really all he can do offensively is finish, that is just one question that I end up having about the Miami Heat, because 20% from 3 as a wing is nuts, and then 39% from mid, that's nuts.
I did not even know it was that bad. That's the thing. I was like, because I just saw it right now, I'm like 19.5. That's I don't even see how they're doing so well. But my main thing with the Heat, ever since going back to when they lost in the finals, it's just been their offense that's been holding them back. They can play well as a defensive team, but who's going to come up and score that 20-25 that they need to win the game? And I'm definitely glad to say, because I used to be a little bit of a hater on Tyler Hero, but I'm glad to see that he, once again, one of the many guards that comes into the league, struggles because he's smaller and doesn't have the skill to play against NBA level guys, goes into the gym for one summer and now comes out to being a 20-point per game scorer off the bench, even though he plays starter minutes. So I'm see off the bench. But like I said, he's been able to develop to be that low-key, that number one guy, because their starting lineup of him, Bam, my fault, Jimmy, Bam, Duncan Robinson,
Kyle Lowry,
PJ Tucker, and Kyle Lowry. I'm like, he's usually that X factor that comes in and, you know, scores a lot off the bench to be able to get them to win games. And it's been like that all season. You know, there hasn't been a lot of other big scoring performances from the Heat that doesn't revolve around whatever his name is, Tyler Hero. And due to that, like I said, I feel like they do have that extra push to be able to go out there and win series just off the backing of him. Because, you know, you have Kyle Lowry who gets you the three-pointer, the charges, all that type of stuff. Duncan Robinson who will shoot threes. Bam who has the mid-range game and stuff in the post. But if you really want yourself a bucket, that's when they say, okay, Tyler, come in and do whatever you want.
Right.
Like last year, that was a big problem with his because he had way too much confidence, but not the shot making ability. Now this year, he has the confidence and the shot making ability to back it up, and it really helps his team elevate their offense. One of their main weaknesses from last year. Yeah, that's how they ended up losing against the Bucks. Bryn Forbes, had more points than Jimmy Butler. That was a really embarrassing stat that people kept bringing up, and I'm like, you can't have your primary player be outscored by somebody off the bench.
Yeah, nah, you
again,
can't
now
have that.
Tyler Hero is now taking that role because does Jimmy still average 20 points per game, or has that gone down to 19? Okay, he still averages 21. Okay. And then I wonder if Tyler Hero averages more points than him.
He should be at 20. Surprised. He really should be at 20.
20.9, so it's not even that far off. But that's him playing less minutes and getting less shots because he's more efficient than him when it comes to shooting altogether. He's almost shooting 40% from three.
Yeah, I'm interested to see if that gets put to the test because, as you mentioned, Tyler Hero's basically playing starter minutes. The other game, whatever the last game was, I believe he played 36 minutes. So it's hilarious. He probably will get Sixth Man of the Year, and rightfully so. But
we should be putting too much qualification to that. It's just their game plan. It's just their game plan. I don't mind it. If you would have win it, I don't mind it. It's just the way they run their game plan.
Yeah, there's that, and I'm just waiting to see, and I'm very interested to see how that is possibly put to the test, because as you just mentioned, there was a lot of things that happened with the Heat last year, but yes, Jimmy Butler had a piss poor series, and if you come into, let's say another series with the Bucks, I'm trying to draw up ways in my head that Jimmy Butler scores on, let's say the Bucks go with it and put Giannis as the defender on Jimmy Butler. I'm trying to think of ways in my head where Jimmy Butler's basically scoring through finishing this year, how he ends up being productive in a series like that.
If I can imagine how that series would go, if that was the main matchup, Giannis would probably back up, and if he were to drive, he'd just use his length to block him or contest, and then if he were to shoot a jumper, he'd just probably contest and try to bleed a block, because, you know, Budenholzer likes doing that. Drop defense is never all about on-ball defense inside of the perimeter.
Right. So it'll be interesting to see also if the Bucks, I'm guessing, aren't going to have Brook Lopez back this year. I don't know. If you don't have that, now I'm also interested to see, well, is Giannis allowed to do that? Because what happens with the Bam Adebayo matchup? Does he get super aggressive on a Bobby Portis, and then all of a sudden,
he will, because that last game he was cooking him. I think he got like 3-and-1s on him. It was crazy.
Exactly. So that's where I'm going, okay, so where exactly are they going to be able to place Giannis in a series like that? But if they are able to use him and just basically put a stop to Jimmy Butler, now that those Tyler Hero buckets go from being a luxury to, hey, we need you. Like, you, this is you. And again, there's a lot of other options to score there, but as far as like our main diet, you got to become like a main diet scorer now in the playoff series. That's what I'm interested to see if happens with the Miami Heat, and if they can pass that test, they can go far. But if Jimmy is quelled too much and then Tyler Hero is strained too much, then it's easy to see how a team like that doesn't have a Kevin Durant type player or just an always go get your bucket type player, playoff performer. It's easy to see how teams like that sometimes just don't end up making it, because that's sometimes the playoff comes down to that, which is why, like I said, I'm so in between on the Nets, because they have two guys like that, so they could break some rules. That could end up happening. But
because Brook Lopez was such a vital part of their playoff run, even though he wasn't doing a lot of scoring, because he was making sure Bam Adebayo wasn't getting anything in the paint nor at the mid-range. He was just making sure he used his stocky body to make sure he didn't go anywhere. And then the same thing against DeAndre Ayton, even though all they had to do was just do the Luka ball thing with CP3 and just switch him on the pick and roll and just have CP3 shoot mid-ranges over him.
Right. So that's going to be super fascinating. And even if Brook Lopez did come back, I'm not sure how useful he would be. That's a big guy coming back from a back injury late in the season. We'll end up seeing. But yeah, we're praying for Heat Bucks Part 3 I am anyways. I want to see how that would play.
Especially with Giannis, dealing with the wall of Giannis with PJ, Bam, and Jimmy, because in that one game they went against last time, when Jrue Holiday got the game winner, they had this long streak of PJ and Bam being out at the same time. No, it was PJ and Jimmy being out at the same time, and that's when Giannis was scoring like 15 and a quarter. because he was able to go one-on-one versus Bam rather than have to deal with all three of them at the same time.
Right.
And I'm surprised Spoelstra didn't change that up, but it ended up losing them the game because that's when Drew Holiday was able to get that one-on-one situation on Gabe Vincent and throw it up over Bam.
That was the interesting part about that Heat game. The last Heat and Bucks game they played, the Heat they pretty much had a win there. They had a win until the end. So that's another reason I'm so intrigued by it. It's like, yeah, the Bucks won it, but also that was a really close call too. They had to finesse that there at the end, and so it'd be interesting to see the type of adjustments that it made to keep something like that from happening. Our last topic here, we had some more written down, but I'll get to those another day. It's less of a basketball topic, but just because it got bigger than I imagined it would. So Westbrook in the media, obviously for all the wrong reasons this year. Terrible season with the Lakers. The Lakers terrible season overall, but Westbrook having a terrible season, and he finally broke silence, because I feel like in a lot of NBA players, you don't really ever hit. Let's just go ahead and cut all that out. I've never heard him acknowledge Westbrook before. I never see him online, so I didn't know if he'd actually seen that name. But even there was tape that came out of him at a game telling a fan, put respect on my name, because they were calling him Westbrook. He's saying basically his logic behind it. It was, hey, I have kids that wear this name proudly, and I need to start protecting it. So there's that. There's obviously, we have to mention and his wife came out too and saying that they're basically getting death threats, as you know how toxic sports gets.
Lakers
and
fans.
and he's playing in LA. He's playing in LA, and it's just a really bad situation, which the question we can't answer right now is whether he will opt to play there again, knowing how bad this is for his family and everything. Who knows if that's going to happen. But so obviously death threats are never cool with sports. I think you can criticize players, or you can critique players' games, or talk about what they can do better. Obviously, the dumb shit just doesn't make any sense. But I'm not gonna. We can't sit here and say it's not happening. DMs exist, so I'd never seen a Westbrook death threat, but it's probably happening in DMs, most likely.
Right.
But I am interested in just what you thought about the whole situation, because the one thing I don't do, and I'm not Westbrook, not an NBA player, but I don't acknowledge trolls, because you give trolls life. That's how they succeed. They thrive off of that. That literally puts a battery in their back. I felt like going out and acknowledging the Westbrook thing is probably the worst thing he could have. I think that's the worst thing he could have done. If the Lakers were in the playoffs, I guarantee, or even play in, Westbrook is shooting important free throws. I guarantee Westbrook chants are going to be breaking out this year. I guarantee it, because now they know that bothers him. And I never knew that bothered. I didn't know he knew it existed. Put that out there. That's ammo, I feel like.
Yeah, because I remember in that one game, I think they were going against the Knicks, and he had like a vital three in the corner. And I think he was at home too, and people were like, "Don't shoot!" and then he hesitated, and then he proceeded to shoot. I was like, "No, he hears that type of stuff everywhere." But I think this is one of the main problems. I don't want to turn this into a LeBron thing, but I have to speak on it.
Yeah, speak on it.
LeBron James, whenever he has these type of players in, they're put under a microscope, because you're LeBron James' teammate. You add on to LeBron James's legacy, and it's even 2 times that now that he's in LA. And this is one of the main things I've always been saying. This is why a lot of big time players don't want to play with LeBron, because of all the media backing that's going to be put behind them being LeBron James's teammate. And if they have one bad game, everything's going to be put on you if you're the one that's shooting bad, because LeBron doesn't really have too many bad games. And if they lose, it's like, hey, you're the second guy. What happened there? And now again, Russell Westbrook. This is probably the biggest microscope Russell Westbrook has ever been put on, in his entire career. He was the poster child for the Thunder. Couldn't do no wrong, getting all these triple doubles. And then you saw slowly the Westbrook slander start to become more of a thing. He goes to Houston. He has that viral picture of him being left open against the Lakers to shoot the three. Yeah. Him going crazy off of hitting that one in game 1. And then he couldn't do anything else after that. Goes to the Wizards, couldn't really get anything going until he had a couple of monster triple doubles. And now he's with the Lakers, and it's like, okay, what are you going to do with LeBron? Because a lot of people were criticizing that trade in the first place because of the spacing issues and how they need another off-ball guard. But then you brought in Westbrook, and it's like, what's going to happen with that? But even then, like I said, you're being brought into LA and you're LeBron James's teammates. That's like a double negative. And of course, all this talks are going to happen due to that. And I can only imagine it does get to people. Some people turn criticism into fuel, but some people don't take it like that. And I understand that's just, everybody's different in that case. But yeah, like you said, giving the trolls of the internet, and even people like Skip Bayless, who say it on a regular basis, puts it on his Twitter, uses it as a way to get people to watch Undisputed. Like, that's not what you need to do, because that could be his next talk on the that could be his next talk on his show the next week. Just off of that alone, is like, he's seeing all this stuff happening to him and he's letting it get to him. Come on, Westbrook, you can't let that happen to you. It's like, because I can only imagine how it does affect him. We've already seen it a couple of times where he freezes on threes, or now he's missing even more shots. I forgot what he shot in his last game where LeBron scored like 50. It's just getting worse and worse. And if he doesn't take that $40 million a year, I wouldn't blame him. I mean, he's already making enough money to live off of. So if I was in that situation, I'd probably just try to find a new team. People would call me stupid for not taking that money, but like the amount of ridicule he would get doing it in LA compared if he was onto another team is absolutely just a whole difference, because he wouldn't get the same type of shit if he was somewhere else, compared to being LeBron's teammate playing in Los Angeles, one of the biggest sports markets in the US.
What did you think of LeBron's comment to the media the other day about criticism? Did you see it?
No, did he make a tweet or something, or did he do an interview?
No, I think it was in an interview. I read it from, I think it was Harrison Fegan is probably, don't go looking for it. It might end up, it was one of the Lakers guys. Anyways, LeBron basically said something along the lines of, it's LA. I don't think it was in response to the whole Westbrook situation, but just in criticism in general. And I think he said something along the lines of, it's LA. This is just kind of what happens here. Franchise, they expect royalty from this franchise. They can kind of say what they want.
Yeah, Draymond Green even was even telling them not to do that, because he compared them to like being spoiled because of all the championships they won and stuff like that. Even people who are like new Lakers fans take on that entitlement of wanting more because they have more than everybody else.
Yeah, I found it interesting right after the Westbrook comments came out and how serious that was about the death threats and just how toxic it's gotten, that LeBron's comment a couple of days later is basically, this is LA, they say they this is what they're gonna do, and I don't know, it wasn't full, and with how serious that situation was, it didn't feel that. So I was shocked, because I thought he would probably gotten some more support behind it, but that was basically just like LeBron, he's been dealing with criticism his entire career, and
I'm about to say, those are two entirely different players. Like, this is the first time we've ever seen Russell Westbrook get this type of criticism in his career. LeBron James came into the league with criticism. I know you probably know that viral interview with the rest of his players basically saying that he's not going to be all that good on the team when he was a rookie on. Like, he came into the league with that microscope we put on him. Russell Westbrook always been put into a positive light everywhere that he went, and now again, this is his first time he's ever been, booed and all that stuff with the Lakers. Yeah, like, LeBron James is probably just numb and used to it, so he's probably going to have more of a cynical take towards it. Like, this is just how it is. You're just going to have to deal with it. And I'm like, Russell Westbrook isn't used to this type of stuff. You're probably going to have to help him out a little bit mentally, because you're probably going to need him on more of a mental edge than where he is now, being all droopy and now isn't able to shoot the ball correctly because of it.
Yeah, I would say definitely to this level for sure, because I guess just to build off what you were saying, in the spots that he's been in his career, it was next to KD. He was number 2 there. It was also in Oklahoma, so it's nothing like LA. But they were really good.
Plus, he had the success going on for him, so it's like you really couldn't say anything about him.
Yeah, he was really, really, even last year, that last stretch he had with the Wizards and getting them to the playoffs, there's always been the negatives to Westbrook games, but it's been, I guess, even for him, he's probably been able to drown it out and going, well, look, we win when I get triple doubles, or I can still do this, I can still do these positive things. And I would agree with you in saying Los Angeles the first time that it's just been all bad. Like, this is because people have been criticizing Westbrook since he won the MVP, basically, criticizing parts of his game. There's always been a good with the bad, but now it's just like, damn. There was a play against the Wizards the other night where LeBron pinned I think it was Neto's shot to the backboard, or Kispert. He pinned it to the backboard and they get out on a fast break, and Westbrook gets all the way to the rim and just lays the ball, basically like wedges it almost to the rim and then misses it practically. And it's harsh, because and you see LeBron's body language kind of droop. I think he finishes with 5 points in that game. That was 2 years ago. That's a dunk. That's a crazy Westbrook dunk 2 years ago. And that's part of what's happened is you just don't really get those anymore, because he's losing at least half a step. If it's a quarter of a step, it's half a step. It's not what it was when he used to dunk so loud that you could hear it throughout the entire arena. He can get that every now and then, but doesn't happen as much as it used to. So yeah, you know, it's a microscope. It's extremely toxic. LA, Kuzma talks about it. Playing in LA is just extremely toxic. And yeah,
that's
like
why he's joined the small market down there in Washington, because he loves that crowd over there.
Yeah, and it's look, man, at the end of the day, this was a situation that was set up for failure. With health, the Lakers would be a better team than this. If everyone, oh yeah, all the way down to Kendrick Nunn. If they just had that entire roster, maybe they wouldn't have been a championship team, but they would probably be still like top 4 or something like that. They would not be fighting for their lives like they have been this year. But still, though, it was always kind of set up to where Westbrook was going to be a fall man. Because from the day that it happened, my first video, the reaction video I did to it, barbershop talk I did to it, was me basically trying to invent ways that it could work. And Westbrook and LeBron isn't that fit isn't necessarily the whole problem with the Lakers, but in moments where they really need it, or where there's times where you really need to space the floor or whatever, just the fit is not there. To say Westbrook and LeBron and Westbrook is fit on this Lakers team, you don't even have to just say LeBron. Say Westbrook on this Lakers team, because that's really where I was going with it. It just doesn't fit. It didn't really make sense when it first happened. It doesn't make sense now. And earlier this season, if you were high on it, it was because you thought you were getting Russell Westbrook that could still athlete his way through things, basically. Because if it's the Westbrook that could still jump and run and get in transition and do all these things and fit, yeah, that one could still finesse you some games. But just as a basketball fit, it was bad from the start, and it was in LA, and it was next to LeBron. And so now we're here where, gosh, I would be surprised if, I mean, I don't want to say I'd be surprised if a man took $47 million to play in Los Angeles, but boy, that, like, neither side can want that at this moment, though. No. Like, I don't. No. Yeah, at this specific moment. But
I'm about to say, it's just still crazy, because what a lot of people thought is that Russell Westbrook was going to come in to alleviate the ball handling duties of LeBron, so he wouldn't have to do all this stuff at 37. Now we're seeing this man, because I made a tweet about it yesterday saying that their last 2 wins in both games, LeBron had to score 50, and they lost 6 out of their last 8.
Yeah,
and now it might be 7 out of the last 9 coming into the night, and I'm just like, this is ridiculous. Like, he has to go out there basically playing playoff LeBron style just to win games in the regular season.
Yeah,
against the Wizards. I'm like, that's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, the Bradley Beal-less Wizards. And I would say if he wasn't hawking down Kareem's record at this moment, they would probably shut him. They would probably shut him down, because there's nothing left to really play for if you're the Lakers this year.
They got this man playing center.
Yeah, center. Yeah, which should be, again, if they were healthy, that should have been a luxury to have. Instead, it's been, okay, well, we kind of need this, especially to try to make some things work. We need this. But yeah, the only reason I pretty much kind of retired from Lakers talk on the pod, but since those new things came out with Russell Westbrook, definitely thought it was something that should be mentioned. And you know, hopefully, again, I had said weeks ago, I gave up on this experiment like a month and a half ago in saying that I just wanted, it was actually when I was hoping that they could find a way to get Russ traded, because I kind of saw it getting here. It was getting so bad. I'm like, yeah, this doesn't really, and he looked sad in these press conferences. I think it'd be best for him and everybody if he just wasn't there. Now he's finishing the season there. So this season cannot end fast enough. The Westbrook and LA experiment cannot be end fast enough. I have questions about his game and can criticize his game, but I don't like the situation is just, it's ugly and toxic. So, you know, we definitely like to see it go ahead and end like this episode. Before I ended it, it is just not funny, but it is ironic that it was like rumors of him possibly ending up on your Clippers at a point. I remember of like Russ and Kawhi and George. And even then I was like, well, from the fit, like, how does that really work? That's always the question, is where does Russ, you know, end up fitting? But,
so many people in my Discord are like, yo, so you might get Russell Westbrook. I don't want him anywhere near that team. No.
Yeah, I didn't think it worked. And I didn't think it worked in LA, but yeah, at a minimum, yeah, I hope him and his family find happiness, because the fact that his wife got on there and tweeted, I didn't even know she had a Twitter. That was the first thing I saw. I was like, wow, me either. it's getting bad. Well, we've reached the end of this episode. Before we end it, you know, tell people where they can find you. Tell them where they can find your channel, like your posting schedule, if you have one, type of content you make, all that, because we kind of didn't do that at the beginning, other than establishing that you are among us in the NBA YouTube community.
So again, my name is Alvini Linguine. I upload once a week on my YouTube. I usually just make random basketball videos that I just find very interesting, because if there's one thing about me and YouTube, it's got to be something I want to do. You know, this is more of a hobby for me right now, and it's something I want to turn into a full-time thing. I upload once a week. Follow me on Twitter at Alvini_Linguine, on Instagram _Alvini_, and I stream about like 4 or 5 times a week on Twitch, Alvini_Linguine.
Absolutely, yeah. If you were, or you in the audience listening, if you were one of the few that were in our, what was that, Toxic Team Up streams nearly a year ago, then you recognize him. Recognize his voice. You definitely recognize him. He was with us.
Yeah. I remember seeing a couple of your videos, and I remember when I would say a couple of things, you bring up the courage animation of me being like, ooh, I'm like, oh my gosh, this dude's killing me.
Man, I still hate to this day that Team Up just wasn't more popular. We had all the names in there, and those games were so much fun, and I just could not for the life of me make anybody really care about it. I don't know, but that was so much fun. And then they took it out of 2K.
Next gen, because everybody was down to do it on next gen, and we only did it that one time on current. And it just didn't really hit the same.
Yeah, no way. I just, anytime they're in the group and they're asking us to play, I'm like, that's current gen, bro. I don't even respond. I'm not going to play current gen, but I'm good. But anyways, yeah, thank you for coming on. Thank you all for listening. If you didn't rate at the beginning of the show and you liked it, be sure to rate at the end, and I will see you next week.